Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and another edition of the RePlay podcast. A bit of exciting news over the past few days, of course, with the announcement that we will be getting a sequel to The Matrix. Today, The Matrix, for me personally, is still one of the best action sci-fi films of all time. I do know a lot of people have issues with the second and third film where they feel the quality actually declined. But however it is you may actually feel about the last two films, there's no doubt that The Matrix um, pretty much set the standard for most for a lot of action films from that point, from that moment onwards. Right? What the Wachowskis managed to accomplish at the time is just phenomenal. And to date, I don't believe we've gotten a film that has actually reached that height. Right? We haven't. Now, comparing I mean, CG now with the advances in technology versus then, the action sequences don't hold up great, but they're still pretty good for the time that they were actually made. Um, so far, we do know that Keanu Reeves himself will be reprising his role as well as Carrie-Anne Moss as Trinity. I do have some concerns with the direction, if they are going in the direction I think they are. Um, so far, over the past few years or so, Hollywood has been on this trip of nostalgia where they're relying so much more on nostalgia and less on storytelling to drive the films. And I do hope that The Matrix doesn't fall into that category and become the new Men in Black or the new Ghostbusters, right? I would hate to see it go in that direction. No. Uh, we do know so far that outside of Neo and Trinity coming back, that Wachowskis will be returning, and that does give me some hope that that the story that they do have an actual story to tell, and they're not just bringing this back specifically just for the sake of having a sequel, right? Unfortunately, only one Wachowski will be returning. Lana will be coming back, but not Lily. You know, I mean, that doesn't give me too much pause because the world of the Matrix has already been established. The characters are already established. So she's essentially just going to be catapulting on what is already there and not necessarily creating I mean, there will be new characters, I imagine, but a lot of the groundwork has already been laid with the first three films. So I'm still on board. I love that there's Wachowski involved. I have followed these directors because over the years, because I love I enjoy their work because they don't stay inside the box. They experiment. They try new things. They touch on topics that most films and other directors otherwise try to avoid. I absolutely love that about them. So of course, a lot of people have noted uh, uh, Jupiter Ascending as the one of their not so great films. I haven't seen Jupiter Ascending just yet, mostly because of Channing Tatum, if I'm being honest. But I will be checking it out. That and Speed Racer, which I'm told is actually pretty good. I watched the Speed Racer cartoon as a kid, and I'm told this does do it justice. So I'm going to be checking both films out. Outside of that, one of my favorite TV shows of all time is Sense8. Now, a lot of people haven't watched Sense8, so if you haven't, be sure to go and check it out. It is available on Netflix. Initially, there was only one season of Sense8. It didn't get enough views. I hate that Netflix uses this business model. Um, Oftentimes, I feel you have to give a show time to develop a fan base, right? Especially where you're not marketing it as much. And they're not great at marketing, if I'm being honest. So Sense8 didn't get a lot of views, and at the same time, it was cancelled for that reason. But Netflix did allow the cast and crew to come back to do a second season to kind of wrap things up for the characters. Now, season two, while it's not as good as season one, it does feel somewhat rushed because they are trying to wrap everything up for the characters. It is still a fantastic season, and the series overall, season one and two, is just phenomenal. Um, and since it goes, is essentially about 8 individuals who are from vastly different worlds in terms of how they're brought up. They're in different countries, and one of the things I enjoyed about that show is the scenery and being able to visit these different locations, different parts of the world that you may not otherwise be able to go. But it's just fantastic to see that in a film. We don't see that often enough, right? But there are 8 different characters in different parts of the world, different countries, having their own problems. But how Sensei works is that they are part of what's called a cluster, and these characters are connected in that way, and they're all born on the same day, if I remember correctly. So they all possess this innate ability to actually connect with each other. So while they're in different parts of the world, they can actually communicate subconsciously. And what's cool about it is later on they discover that they're able to not just communicate, but sort of transfer capabilities, right? So if one of the characters speaks a different language, then the other character can actually borrow that and speak through her, or him or her, right? Your favorite character in it being Sun, and she can kick ass, right? And oftentimes one of my other favorite characters, Capheus, who cannot fight to save his life, but they make a connection, and he's able to borrow her abilities to actually do martial arts, and he uses that to solve some of his problems back home in Africa, right? So it's a very interesting story, interesting characters. There's never a dull moment. It's a fantastic TV show. I recommend it to everyone, every opportunity I get, and Wachowskis did a fantastic job with it as well. And because of that, any project that Wachowskis are attached to, I am immediately on board with it. So with The Matrix coming on for a fourth installation, I'm very much interested. I still have some reservations, if only because, again, as I mentioned, I don't want this to be just a nostalgia, a cash grab for the film. I have hopes, because the Wachowskis are involved, that will not be the case. But in terms of the direction, though, the direction will determine how well this film actually does, because you'll remember at the end of the Matrix film, Neo died, but at the same time, following the rules of the Matrix, that was not his first time at the source, so the one will keep coming back over and over and over again. So they could explore that and find some way to bring him back, and Trinity and the others. But that said, I would much prefer that we move on to something, to a different set of characters, and that could very well still be the case. The one of two things I would want to happen. The first being that they do a prequel to before Zion actually fell, right? The time span between the one returning was never really fully established, so a lot happens in between. I would prefer that they do a prequel back when Morpheus was in his younger days, and I forget his girlfriend at the time, Jada Pinkett Smith's character, whatever her name was, but do a prequel to before Zion actually fell, and that's something that would invigorate the series again for most people. But I don't think going back to continue the old characters is the way to go. But if not a prequel, then I would prefer that they take it a step further and move past Neo and Trinity and introduce some new characters. One of the main selling points for The Matrix, outside of the film and the filmography, the cinematography, the actors, outside of all of that, is the world of The Matrix itself. Immediately after watching the Matrix films, I went and watched Animatrix, which was just absolutely fantastic. So if you are a fan of anime or animation, then be sure to go and check out Animatrix. But the world of The Matrix itself is just so vast, and there's so many things that you can actually explore in that world. I would hate to see it wasted on just following these same characters for a sequel. So if not a prequel, I prefer to follow a different set of characters. get us back into the world of the Matrix and show us more, because we didn't get to see a whole lot. We got glimpses, especially in Reloaded. We got to see and learn more about the world and more about the other people that are actually there. And I loved all those characters. Neo was great, Trinity was great, Morpheus was great, but also the other characters in the Matrix themselves, they're just so damn entertaining. And the people, the programs, we want to know more about the world and learn more about the world of the Matrix. So I would much prefer that they either do a prequel, or give us a time skip and move past Neo and to someone else. And there's still some possibility that could happen, that they could use this movie to sort of catapult a new series of Matrix films. If that is the case, then that would be fantastic. So the possibilities are endless, and I'm very hopeful that this will actually this will open the door for more films, even a Matrix animated series or something to that effect. But I'm overjoyed. I absolutely love the Matrix series, and even just hearing about this news makes me want to go back and watch the trilogy again. So the Matrix, guys, the Matrix. I can't not be excited about this. We haven't gotten a release date or anything like that as yet. It's still pretty earlier on, but I do recall that Lana said that she has some ideas as to what she wants to do because of how technology has now changed versus when the original Matrix came out. So I imagine, for example, they used phone booths to actually get to get inside the Matrix and move around. But now we actually have cell phones and the internet, and the landscape is vastly different now than it was actually then. So there's so much that she could actually do. But at the same time, that does mean that there are some limitations, because I mean, I don't think, and without the phone booth there, imagine watching the first Matrix film, and a lot of the interesting bits that happened in the first Matrix happened while attempting to get to a payphone. That fight with Neo and Agent Smith in the subway only happened because he was trying to get to a payphone. Now, if he can just take his smartphone out and just dial in and be pulled out, then that's it. That doesn't make for a very interesting story. So while it does introduce some new elements that they can actually use, it does provide some limitations for the Matrix itself. So it will be interesting to see how exactly Lana approaches this, but I have all the faith in the world in her and the Wachowskis themselves, and I cannot wait. I'm looking forward to this. This is definitely now at the top of my list of my most anticipated film for whenever it comes out. Now, the next story on our list, of course, has fans divided over the past week, and that is the Sony Spiderman and the MCU split. This is a very intricate matter where contracts and rights are concerned, and we by no means actually have all the details and or even the details of the contract or what the negotiations actually were. Right, all these stories being reported need to be taken with a grain of salt, because we just don't know. Essentially, what's being reported, and initially what was reported actually was Disney made a proposal to Sony, which Sony then denied, and fans were outraged at Sony because how dare you turn down a proposal from Marvel and from Disney, and but it was later edited to actually confirm that Disney made a proposal, Sony turned it down, and they made a counter proposal which Disney then turned down. And I know fans don't know how to feel about themselves. It's very interesting that I don't know. While I enjoy the MCU films, this mob mentality that I realize that a lot of the Disney fans have, it's borderline ridiculous, if I'm being honest, because they were outraged at Sony initially when the presumption was that it was actually Sony who turned the deal down. But then when the additional information was revealed, somehow there was no outrage, right? In the Disney camp, and we've seen this before, right? We've seen it before. We've seen it happen with Netflix before, and Netflix pretty much told Disney to go screw themselves, and in my mind that was the right thing to do. That was the right thing to do. Disney is becoming something of a monopoly now. As much as fans don't care. I've seen people say they don't care about the business side of things. They just want their movies. But there are repercussions. You might not see it now, but there's a reason why monopolies are a bad idea. Um, but some of the details coming out of these reports are that Disney proposed a change in their contract going forward, where they would now they would now receive 50% of the revenue from the Sony Spider-Man films, where initially it was 5%, and Disney, of course, would maintain all proceedings from toys, which is actually a great deal, because if you don't realize it, the where toys and merchandise is concerned, it's a lot of money, right? And of course, Sony was financing the solo film, so from that perspective, it's a good deal because Disney isn't necessarily funding the films. And of course, from Sony's end, they do not receive any proceedings from Spider-Man's appearance in the MCU films, right? So that was actually a pretty good deal, and Disney themselves decided they wanted to change that agreement, and they wanted 50% now. There are good arguments to be made from both sides. The most popular one that I've seen from some of the fans on the Disney side of the fence is like, Spider-Man made $1 billion, so that justifies Disney asking for 50%. Why, right? Why? The film was still produced by Sony, so why should Disney get 50%? And the argument that Spider-Man made $1 billion because of Disney, there's some merit to it, being that okay, the Sony Spider-Man film followed the Disney films, and because they had callbacks to some characters from the MCU and appearances as well, that automatically meant that it made $1 billion. I don't believe so, right? There's no discounting that there are contributing factors, but there's also no discounting the fact that adding Spider-Man to the MCU actually added a layer of public interest in the MCU itself. It invigorated the MCU, right? A lot of Spider-Man fans who went and saw Civil War because Spider-Man was actually in it. So both parties benefited from this arrangement. It wasn't just Sony, right? And bear in mind that Sony did not receive any revenue from Spider-Man's involvement in Civil War. So how can you then justify Disney asking no for 50% because Spider-Man made $1 billion? Now, and that argument aside, we do have to consider that Spider-Man, the character of Spider-Man, his films, the animated Spider-Man was a beloved character long before the MCU was around. Whatever issues people might have with Garfield's second Spider-Man movie, because I believe the first one was actually well done, but Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films were iconic, and to this day are some of the best Spider-Man films out there. Spider-Man 2 still maintains, to me, to this day, is still one of the best Spider-Man films out there. Spider-Man 2 is actually still the highest grossing domestic Spider-Man film. So Spider-Man 2 is still the highest grossing domestic film. And so with that, the Spider-Man film franchise was already well established before the MCU. And I don't believe any of the Spider-Man films to date have grossed below 700 million. And that's no easy task, right? And that's no easy task, and by no means a failure. This notion that hitting 1 billion suddenly means that the film is good, it's ridiculous. It's not. Transformers made $1 billion, and that movie was just garbage. So it's the landscape that we are in now, and we're seeing the Disney monopoly at work here now, and I fear the death of, honestly, innovative, fresh ideas with this happening. But as it is now, I believe they will come to some agreement later on, right? Not discounting the fact that And again, as I mentioned, Spider-Man was already an established character in his own right in the film industry. Venom made $1 billion as well. And there's no argument there that, and this is from someone who didn't particularly enjoy the Venom that much. I love Tom Hardy. I love Venom as a character. But I didn't particularly love the storyline, really. But even I have to admit that, hey, it made $1 billion. It made $1 billion. And this is without Spider-Man's influence in it. My advice to Sony, honestly, would be at this point, would be to not agree. Forget you, Disney. Forget you. Bring Spider-Man home to Sony and have the next film, the next Venom film, introduce Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Spider-Man in that movie. Have Venom take control over Holland for a bit, and you know how it plays out, right? So have the two characters cross over now and build on your own Spider-Verse from that point onwards, right? There are a lot of characters in the Spider-Man universe that have not made it to the big screen as yet. They could literally create their own universe with Spider-Man and Spider-Man's characters. Do that. Do not keep going to Marvel or relying on the MCU, because you've seen what the repercussions are now, right? You're automatically the bad guy as soon as something falls through. So my advice: do what Netflix did. Cut the deal here, end it here, and move on. Now, knowing Suits that the execs there, they probably won't, but that I think is the best course of action. Again, as I said, aside from Venom's doing as well as it did, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is the only Spider-Man film that actually won an Oscar. That didn't happen under the MCU. It happened under Sony. And as much as people want to believe that Disney, the MCU, makes the best films, a lot of the films that we do get would never have been made under Disney. So in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is potentially one of the best Spider-Man movies ever, and it would not have been made under Disney. Why? Because they already have an established Spider-Man character, and they would not have in an attempt to not undercut their own sales, they would only have one Spider-Man film running at a time. You would not have gotten Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So I don't know. I think Sony should cut their losses here, focus on building their character and their Spider-Verse, and let Disney go. But again, knowing the Suits, knowing how beneficial it could be for both sides, because Spider-Man is already established as a sort of a replacement for Tony Stark in the MCU. But what would need to change, and I imagine is part of why the deal can't yet go through, aside from Disney asking for too much, Sony should ask for more. Because let's be real, if Holland's Spider-Man is going to be as integral a part of the MCU as he is being made out to be, the leader of the Avengers, that seems to be the direction that they're going in. If that is going to be the case, then he's going to be a focal character in the MCU. And if that's the case, why shouldn't Sony benefit somewhat from that? Initially, when he was introduced, he was just a part of the team. But if he's going to be a focal part of it, that means that Holland himself will have to devote more time in more projects for the MCU and not be available for Sony's universe. So why do that? So if Sony is going to engage in an agreement going forward, they need to ask for more. I mean, in my opinion, I believe they are the ones who should be asking for more, not Disney. But we'll see. I mean, things are still unfolding. Information is still coming out. We don't know what will come of it, but I think fans just need to settle down. I mean, let these companies decide what exactly is best for them, or what's best for their characters, and we need to just stop this give it back to Disney thing that's going on. It's just ridiculous. you do not want every single character to be under Disney. I know fans think they want it, but you do not want that. You're gonna have the same movie just with different characters, the same tone. You do not want that. So I mean, as the story unfolds, I think eventually we'll get some form of announcement in terms of what the agreement is. I believe Tom Holland himself still has 2 more films that he needs to go with contractually. So we'll see. I mean, some people have proposed that maybe they use I don't know, his monkey costume instead of the Spider-Man costume, and just call him Iron Monkey, or call him something else in the in Sony's universe, and call him Spider-Man in the MCU, which makes no sense to me. If anything, it would be the reverse, or should be the reverse. But it's clear that a lot of fans are prioritizing what they want for the MCU with what may be best for the Spider-Man character himself. And I've made it no secret that while I enjoy the Spider-Man films to some extent, I don't think Holland is the best Spider-Man that I've seen so far. It still remains Tobey Maguire, and I don't know where. I mean, Andrew Garfield would come second, and I guess Tom Holland would be third. Not even third, fourth. The Spider-Man animated series would fall third, and then he would be fourth. Tobey was, don't get me wrong. I mean, Tobey was an excellent Peter, not a great Spider-Man. Garfield was a great Spider-Man, not a great Peter. Tom Holland, for me, because I've been such a huge Spider-Man fan, my list of favorite superheroes, Spider-Man ranks number 2, right after Batman. So I've been a huge fan of the character for a long time, and Holland just doesn't embody that character for me. He feels more like a protege of Tony Stark than he is Uncle Ben's son, right? And the argument has been made that yes, we understand people who want the character to be more true to his origins, but we've seen the Uncle Ben death over and over again. We don't need to see it again. We don't need to go back down that road. And I take that criticism, and that is true, right? And one of the things I liked about this Spider-Man is that they didn't retread that. They didn't go back down, having Uncle Ben die on screen at least, and going back through that. So while I agree that we didn't need to see it, we didn't need to see Uncle Ben die, I still believe that Uncle Ben still be the driving force behind Peter himself and what he does. And the first time we were introduced to him, we get a feeling that that's what he's been doing. I'm doing what Uncle Ben would have wanted. But then immediately after that, they shifted gears, and then it was Tony, and it was just okay. I'm going to do what Mr. Stark would do, and from that moment on, it's just been Tony, and it feels more like he's an Iron Man fanboy more so than he is a hero in his own right, which Spider-Man has always been. There have been instances in the comics where he has gotten assistance from other characters who have mentored him, yes, but he has still maintained. He was always still a hero in his own right, with his own tragic backstory that motivates him to do what he does, and so that for me has always been missing from Tom Holland. And it isn't just the suit itself, but again, I mean, we don't see him being as intelligent as we know Spider-Man actually is in devising his own, not only devising his own devices to actually use his own suit, but in how he defeats the enemies, how he fights as well, right? One of the things I enjoyed the most about The Amazing Spider-Man, despite how not great the second movie was being in Peter Parker's mind and seeing how he devises, okay, this is how I can beat this guy. I don't see that with Holland, and that's something that's just missing from the character. It just doesn't feel like Spider-Man to me. But again, this is just one fan's opinion, and I acknowledge that a lot of people enjoy the character, and that's great for them. but I do want to see the character sort of return to form in some ways, and I don't know if we'll get that while he is a part of the MCU, because they always have to be looking at the bigger picture, right? It's not so much, he can't be a solo hero anymore, and that works to some extent, but I feel like we lose more and more of the character as the MCU develops more, right? So for me personally, I mean, I just enjoy Spider-Man, the way that I've imagined him, and having a younger version of the character works perfectly fine. But his motivations seem to have changed, and he just doesn't feel like the same Spider-Man that he once was. So as I said, it would be as if Batman woke up one day and suddenly said, "You know what? My parents died, but yeah, that doesn't matter anymore. Superman he's been doing great things, and I love the way Superman is, and I'm going to do what I believe Superman would do. I'm going to go through my day and how I fight and every single thing to do what Superman does every day. And if Superman passes away, I'll act in Superman's memory. I don't care about my parents anymore. They're not what motivates me to keep going, right?" So it would be as if Bruce Wayne stopped caring about his parents' death, and instead of that being the driving force behind what he does, it would, he turned to some other hero, and that's his mentor now. And that's the way I look at the current Spider-Man versus what he should be. It was fine removing Uncle Ben's death. It was fine when you had a Aunt Bay instead of the Aunt May. That's fine. The new characters that they introduced, which were borrowed from Miles Morales' storyline in some ways, that's fine too. And again, I'm all for new ideas and a fresh take on the character. But when you remove what's at the core of what makes the character special, then it's not the character anymore. So I don't know what will come off this this agreement, but I suspect they will come to some agreement, because there's just too much there's too much to gain from both companies, and Sony isn't the only company that stands to benefit from this. Marvel does as well, and especially because the character has become such an integral part of the storyline. If they want to continue telling that story, then they will have no choice but to come to an amicable agreement with Sony. And again, as I've said, I'm not trying to pick sides, but I do believe in this case that that Sony is in the right, and Disney is being somewhat greedy, and in doing what Disney does. And as I said before, we've seen it before, and I do hope that Sony does what is best for the character and not so much for the bottom line. But we know that that's what's going to matter at the end of the day, how much they stand to gain, right? So for me, I don't think the best thing for the character is for him to remain in the MCU. I think it's best for him it's best for them to build their own universe with. Right, they've already announced a number of films for his villains, Morbius, one, and so they've already started. We've already had Venom, which was a huge hit, but bring Sony back, bring Spider-Man back home to Sony and explore this character with these villains, and I think it would be a major success. So that's where I am with that, right? I know it's not the popular opinion, but looking at both sides, both parties, what they have to gain, I think that would be the best course of action for the character himself. But we will see over the next few days. I don't imagine they'll let this linger without some public announcement for too long. Right, because the more time that passes where nothing is said, the more it hurts both companies. So I imagine over the course of the next few weeks or so, we will see an official announcement from either one or both parties, and hopefully that is whatever is announced will be something that everyone will be happy with. And of course, the final topic on our list today is Warner Brothers and their official announcement, their new CEO and sign off. Um, if you have been following the news, then you know this is in the wake of their interim CEO Kevin Sujihara having to step down following allegations and an ongoing investigation where he allegedly exchanged sexual favors with an actress to get better roles in films. So Kevin himself had to step down and is now filling that role as CEO at Warner Brothers. What exactly does this mean for Warner Brothers and the DCEU by extension? It's tough. It's too early to say, right? But what we can say is that she certainly brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to Warner Brothers. I believe she's coming from BBC America, which initially seemed an unusual move from BBC America to Warner Brothers, but while there, I believe she did spearhead affiliate sales and marketing for digital assets and syndication, which is no small feat. And prior to that, she was at Nickelodeon as EVP for essentially a multi-billion-dollar retail business where TV, video games, movies, and apparels are concerned. So she's certainly going to be a welcomed addition to Warner Brothers themselves. Though Warner Brothers, of course, we know. I mean, it's interesting. We spoke about the Matrix before, and I'm now wondering whether was the Matrix her idea, right? I don't know. I mean, it could be. It could very well be. I mean, there have been rumors about the Matrix sequel for some time, for several months now, actually. But she has been on board at Warner Brothers for several months as well. So this could very well be something that she's making a big splash when she comes in. Matrix sequel is here, right? But so I mean, whether she is or not, it's certainly a welcome addition, a fresh take. While the DCEU has not, has for many hasn't been fantastic. I don't think it's not the properties, but so much as it is the direction, right? And whether that was Kevin or his predecessor's fault for steering the franchise in the wrong direction, I don't know. But we need new direction. So I'm excited to see Anne come on board, and I'm looking forward to see what she will accomplish here as well. Over the past few months, of course, I mean, Warner Brothers themselves have. I don't think where the DCEU is concerned. First, let me touch on the DCEU. So, for the DCEU themselves, of course, for many of us, that we started to see a downward spiral where from Justice League onwards. For some people, it's Batman v Superman, but I thoroughly enjoyed that film. Man of Steel remains my favorite comic book film in recent memory. Right, not as far as the Dark Knight. Dark Knight is still number one, but Man of Steel was fantastic. Batman v Superman, the director's cut, again, fantastic. And of course, that is where Warner Brothers fell down. Whoever was in charge at the time that butchered the film, the theatrical run, in exchange for shorter run times to have repeats in the cinema. And of course, from then onwards, Justice League was butchered as well. Suicide Squad was the same. Suicide Squad literally had a different tone in the trailers than it did in the movie. In terms of a lot of what was in the trailer wasn't even included in the film itself, and it became a bit more comical. Whereas initially, it seemed as though these were bad people, and later on in the film, it seemed as though you were supposed to sympathize with them, which I believe was the wrong direction to try to take this. So Suicide Squad BVS, not so great. Shazam, A+. Wonder Woman, of course, doing fantastic, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. We haven't been hearing a lot about it, but I'm fine with that, right? As soon as I think filming has wrapped at this point, but as we draw closer and closer to the dates, I did wish they did not move the date though, and kept the June release date. Or at the very least, move it to February. But hey, we're not getting that, unfortunately. So, but whatever date it lands at, I'm definitely there. So they've had some mishaps with DCEU, but again, it's not the properties, it's not it's more the direction, and they need someone who can steer the ship in the direction that we need to get to. And I do hope that with Anne on board now, that we will finally get that. Where Warner Brothers overall is concerned, of course, I mean, there have been some similar mishaps. Pokemon Detective Pikachu, for example, that was released earlier this year. Um, no, I've been playing Pokemon since the trading card games back in the 90s, right? And I don't care about Detective Pikachu. Why would you make a Detective Pikachu movie? Now, again, the idea was great. Pokemon Go reinvigorated the franchise and it was doing well. The Nintendo Switch is out and they're announcing Pokemon Let's Go and a new game for the Switch. Okay, it's fine. This was the right time for a Pokemon movie. The problem, however, was the subject matter that they chose to go with. Detective Pikachu. Why? Nobody talking. No. Why? Now, if they had landed this and decided, okay, because to its credit, the Pokemon in the movie looked fantastic. The designs were great. That was brilliant. Now, if they had gone the route of introducing, God forbid, Ash, Ash, or Red, preferably Red, please, Red, a coming of age story with a young actor choosing his very first Pokemon, going on adventures, introducing Team Rocket or Team Magma, whatever the case might be. That would have been a phenomenal Pokemon live action movie. Now, as to who decided to go with a talking Ryan Reynolds Pikachu, it was ridiculous, right? And don't get me wrong, I enjoy Ryan Reynolds, but Ryan Reynolds is best when he's in mature titles, R-rated content, well, mature content, right? You get the gist of it. But him as a talking Pikachu did absolutely nothing for me. So I mean, get a young actor, have him go on an adventure with his very first Pokemon, build up the world, and you can actually have a Pokemon movie that spans several films, a franchise that spans several Pokemon films. So that would have been the right direction to go. I'm not sure what happened, who decided to go with Detective Pikachu. I'm a fan and I don't even care about Detective Pikachu. I don't imagine the average moviegoer cares about Detective Pikachu. But yeah, there's direction, right? Hopefully, and a fresh take on things can steer us right. I mean, earlier this year we had, Godzilla, which for me, while others, for some people, Godzilla didn't, perform as much as $1 billion, and I don't know why $1 billion is now suddenly the marker for the quality of a film. It's not for me. So I thoroughly enjoyed Godzilla King of the Monsters. It is my favorite film this year, and I can't wait to see Godzilla versus Kong. So I can't wait for that. We have It Chapter 2 coming out in just a few weeks, and that may very well top Godzilla because the first film was just fantastic. And that brings me to the next, the next argument being where horror is actually concerned. Warner Brothers is undefeated there. They continuously kill the horror genre, pun intended. All right, so where horror is concerned, they've delivered time and time again. I know James Wan announced a new horror film. I don't recall the name, but earlier this weekend he made an announcement for a horror film coming out, and can't wait for that. If James Wan is in it, if it's Warner Brothers, I'm on board. I'm on board. So and I know following, there's supposed to be a spin-off for Aquaman, right? The Trench, which is supposed to be a horror vibe. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be if it's following some DC alternate universe comic or something. I don't believe it is, but I do recall there being an announcement for a Trench horror film spin-off from Aquaman. I haven't heard much about it since, but again, once James Wan is involved, I'm on board. So there have been a lot of hits, a few misses, and I believe what they're missing is someone to steer the ship. They're missing the direction that we need to go. And Anne coming on board with all her experience, I can't wait to see what she does going forward. Warner Brothers again. It's with the announcement of the Matrix. It's the Joker movie coming, the Joker film that will be out in a matter of weeks. Uh, there's a lot to look forward to this year, and I don't know. I'm waiting for. Again, whenever there is a new CEO, you can expect some sort of shake-up to happen. We haven't heard anything. We haven't heard anything yet, where as far as Anne is concerned. But she's only recently arrived. She released a memo to the staff, and sort of I'm here now, and we'll see what her big splash is. We'll see what her big splash is. I don't know whether it was the Matrix or not, but there's usually some big shake-up, some big announcement when these CEOs come in, take up their position. So I can't wait to see what Anne has in mind, what her vision is for Warner Brothers, and for me, more importantly, the DCEU, because we need that. We need that. So welcome aboard, Anne, and I can't wait to see what you have in store for us. Alright, everyone, that is it. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the RePlay podcast. Be sure to follow me over on Twitter at studio_replay for this and more content and daily updates. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.